We might want to check the metrics, but it's my thought, without doing so, that this school has typically done pretty well at the next level, both producing and then making an impact at the NFL level. We got Ohio State Buckeyes live for a 99th time. So that means next week will be a historic day. So I guess you guys can, if you're not caring much, of course, in preparing for the big stage, can kind of slouch and let it go this week, because nobody's going to remember this particular show. They'll remember big number 100 next week. So we got from the top, Steve Helwagen from Bucknuts 247 Sports, Kevin Noon, of course, from Buckeye Grove on Rivals, and Tony Gerdeman in Under the Wire from Buckeye Scoop. How are we doing today?
Good.
Doing good.
Everybody's doing well. Yes, it's Justin Fields, if you're listening out there. The pro talent produced by this school, of course, is second to none. But at the quarterback position, can't really come up with anyone that had a long stay in the league that as a starter. So, Justin, it's on you. All right, Steve, we're going to start with you. I give you carte blanche, not even a question. Highs, lows, storylines, wherever you want to take this thing on Pro Day.
Yeah, I think people were very impressed with what Justin Fields was able to do yesterday. He really got rolling once he got warmed up, and obviously it helps having great talent out there throwing the ball to with Olave and Wilson, who were volunteering to help their buddy a little bit on Pro Day and also show themselves off to the NFL scouts, even though they'll be back at Ohio State this fall. I think he was impressive. And I think Trey Sermon was impressive. And obviously Tommy Togiai to do 40 reps on the bench press. That's not something that's usually hit at the combine. I think the record was 49 by a defensive tackle from Washington State about 10 years ago. And really, Tommy was trying to push for that, but didn't quite get that high, but still very impressive and shows why he decided to come out. He is ready to go for the NFL. And some people question it was a middle round pick. And I'm not sure that's going to propel him to the first round. I think Ohio State's got the record right now for the most first rounders. They moved past USC either last year or the year before. And they may only have one this year with Justin Fields, so they're not going to pad their lead a whole lot this year, it doesn't seem like. But it's a pretty solid draft group. I think they'll end up probably 7 to 10 guys ultimately being selected, pretty much as always. And the beat just goes on over there at the Ohio State College when it comes to producing great talent.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I was flipping between ESPN, BTN, and NFL Network yesterday watching the Pro Day because local media was not invited. It was a small event in terms of coverage, shared feeds, and all that good stuff, all those insider TV terms. But they were saying that, if a couple things go right, up to 11 Buckeyes could potentially go. But, you never know. Once you kind of get down to 6, 7 rounds, it's kind of a crapshoot, and sometimes you're better off being an undrafted free agent at that point and kind of pick your opportunity there. But as Steve had said, put aside from the Justin Fields, which was really the big focal point of why everybody wanted to watch yesterday, and it was kind of dueling quarterbacks with Mac Jones at Alabama throwing about a half hour earlier than Justin Fields, and everybody comparing the two of them. I think that a player like Baron Browning really made himself a lot of money going out there, showing a lot of explosive testing numbers. I mean, he just looked really good out there in what he was doing. Tommy Togiai came up a little bit short of trying to break the bench record. Had the opportunity to see the video of it. The first 36 to 38 of them, he just put up like nothing, and then it just kind of slowed down at that point. But I think I pulled a couple muscles just watching it, but it was just really a good opportunity to see these guys out there being able to compete. And again, as Steve had said, with Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson out there and Jamison Williams as well running routes, Garrett Wilson made, a Garrett Wilson type of catch. And I guarantee you all the NFL personnel of the 31 teams that were represented were like, yeah, we already know about this guy. And, fast forward 365 days or whatever. And Garrett Wilson certainly will be on a lot of draft boards.
Yeah, I like Tommy Togiai was asked yesterday, did you feel like you could get to 49? I think we can all relate when he's like, well, you just never know if you're going to get 40 or 49 reps in that 225. It just, as you're going, it just you figure out where you're going to land as you start to fatigue. So, yeah, we all get that. I do wonder, the guy who told Gil Brandt that Justin Fields was a fourth rounder, I'm wondering if yesterday's performance moves him up into the third round, possibly. I think there's a shot there if somebody takes a flyer on him, like, hey, why not? We've got 2/3. Let's throw one way on Justin Fields, and maybe that team can, surprise themselves. I think what we saw from Justin Fields, and Ryan Day said he was showing off at the end, this is stuff that I don't think surprised anybody on the Ohio State beat, watching him make whatever throw you wanted to it. I saw somebody mention on Twitter how they like how these pro days have turned into like trick shot competitions with the quarterbacks. And that's what you saw a little bit with Zach Wilson and Justin Fields. No surprise that they're both trained by the same guy, John Beck, a former BYU quarterback, which I think is a conflict of interest here between these two. But, as Kevin said, Baron Browning putting up, I saw numbers where it was, one of the 5 most athletic linebackers that these tracking companies have ever seen, of like 1,100 linebackers of the last however many years of the NFL, where that he's in the top 5 all time with what he did. And then to hear him say afterwards, like, teams are looking at him as a rush end, defensive end, talking to Jonathan Cooper, teams are looking at me as a linebacker, that kind of juxtaposition. But I think Baron Browning can do whatever. He did say some teams are looking at him as like a middle linebacker and then situational pass rusher. I don't know if that's best for him, because that wasn't what was best for him at Ohio State. You get him outside and let him do some stuff out there. I think that's where he would excel. Or maybe a 3-4 inside linebacker, which is a little bit different than a 4-3 inside linebacker. And then Jonathan Cooper being a 3-4 outside linebacker, probably. These guys are versatile, and the more versatile you can be, the better chance you have of hanging on. So, and then Pete Werner, again, I chuckled during the Big Ten Network broadcast when they said, well, he looked pretty fast, and, there's kind of this stigma that he's stiff, but you can't blame him for getting beat by Devontae Smith in the national championship game. And it's like, well, that wasn't even him. It's the wrong linebacker that you're accusing of being stiff. But another good day for Pete Werner, which also I think a lot of people on the Ohio State beat expected.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question, Tony. You mentioned relating to the Tommy Togiai bench press mark. I just want to let everyone know that being in the close for all of us belie the struggle that we each have there on the bench press. That's in that 40 to 50 range. Whether it's a good day or a bad day. It depends. And to your point, Steve, in projecting about 10 to be the draft total, somewhere in that range for the Buckeyes. Hopefully they can they made Michigan their standard last year. It was a 10-10 tie with Michigan last year. So hopefully they can keep up with the Wolverines.
Yeah, the difference was most of Ohio State's 10 were taken when ESPN was still broadcasting the draft, and most of Michigan's 10 were when it was on NFL Network 7. So there's a little bit of a difference there. I'm kidding, of course. Anybody who gets a chance to go and play in the NFL, where you get drafted is really not all that important, other than, if the higher drafted you are, they're going to give you more of a shot that first year. But the thing is, you get your foot in the door and you make yourself indispensable. And that's what guys like Justin Hilliard yesterday talked about. Could Urban Meyer give him a shot with the Jacksonville Jaguars, maybe as an undrafted free agent, to go down there and be a great special teams player like he was for Urban Meyer at Ohio State and Ryan Day. So, I'm of a mind that, again, it's not worth getting all upset or worried about where somebody is projected today. It's finding a good fit. And, we thought Dwayne Haskins had a great fit when he went to Washington, but then obviously they fired the coaching staff midway through his first year, and the wind starts blowing the different direction. And obviously he made some major mistakes off the field as well. And now, as I was talking to somebody today, maybe Pittsburgh's the place for him to be the heir apparent Ben Roethlisberger, but it's going to take a lot of hard work on his part to make that obviously work out. So
Yeah, to
again,
back you up, Steve.
yep, go ahead.
I was just going to say, overwhelmingly, yes. We got to credit these guys, regardless of the school. Overwhelmingly talented, hardworking, usually do the right things on and off the field. So, regardless of whether they're drafted, that's not a knock on those individual Michigan players. But I certainly argued at some point during this process last year that it does matter and would play out in regards to measuring the impact at the next level of being a top 3 to 4 rounder versus being a 5th or 6th rounder. So those high Ohio State selections, yes, that is showing the difference between. That is just another indicator of the difference between, when you've got 2 of the top 3 selections and then another couple first rounders and then even filling up those second and third rounds versus everybody getting drafted in the back end of the draft. Yeah, that's showing the difference in the 2 programs. Another indicator.
I want to jump in here real quick because we're talking about Michigan, that team up north, depending on, I don't have to do push-ups when I mention their name, but what does it mean when they have players that were kind of middling players in college who then go to the league and get coaching and suddenly are playing a lot better? I mean, you sit there and you look at some of these guys who come out of there that, didn't necessarily flash, came in with 4 and 5 stars, whether it was Rivals or 247 or whatever ranking service you're using, kind of have a meh college career, get drafted, and then they blow up. I mean, just maybe another little bit of an indictment of what's been going on with Jim Harbaugh's coaching staff. And really something that I've said time and time again, that the development isn't there. I mean, they're getting these guys that have these very high ceilings and they're only getting 20, 30, 35% out of them. And then once it becomes a job and once they, things are a little bit different, they're starting to excel.
Rashawn Gary, prime example number 1 of that.
Yeah. Like Gary was 285 pounds, ran like a 4.57 at the combine. And you look at his numbers and they're very pedestrian, and Michigan fans will say, well, it wasn't his role to go and get the quarterback. Well, then you put him in a dumb role. Like if his job as a 6'5", 280-pound defensive end who can run a 4.6, you don't send him to go get the quarterback. We just wanted him to hold the edge. Then you're using him wrong. And it's, as Kevin said, it's an indictment on a lot of stuff. And I still think Jabril Peppers was drafted as much on hype as anything because he didn't play safety at Michigan. When he did play safety, it wasn't very good. That's why they kept moving him down closer to the box. He started out as a corner, couldn't do that. Put him at safety. Yeah, couldn't do that. Now let's put him in a hybrid role. And then you see he gets to the Browns and he has to play 40 yards off the ball just to be able to get somewhere on time. But yeah, there's all kinds of examples from Michigan. I still don't understand the Jeremy Mayfield hype. That has somewhat died down, the offensive tackle. I don't get the Kwity Paye stuff as a first rounder. No. He has done very little in terms of production. Maybe he's a great athlete, but I don't get it. And maybe that'll be a guy who blossoms once he gets out of Michigan. But he was never really that much of a difference maker outside of maybe like 3 or 4 games in his career.
Right, and some of those stats were put up in garbage time. He's a tremendous story. I had the chance to see the Rinaldi, whoever of the world, do the whole thing on there. He's a kid, regardless of what color blood is flowing through your veins, scarlet and gray, maize and blue. You have to be pulling for this kid. I mean, it's just a great story, but seeing him as like the top rush end or whatever on the board is questionable. But then again, maybe he'll go in the 4th round since that seems to be where we're burying, obvious first round picks.
Tony, you should think about doing a Michigan segment maybe once a week or maybe a particular day. Set that aside for some Michigan talk.
Let me work on something alliterative and see if we can't come up with something.
It's always a good way to market that. Yes, go with the alliterative. As Urban Meyer did with going with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that was prominent in his mind as he accepted that offer. All right, Vinay, we appreciate the super chat contribution as always. Appreciate that. Everyone else, dive into the live chat to give us your comments, your questions. You guys ultimately produce the show. Appreciate everyone being here. So from Vinay and whomever wants to jump on this first, second, and third, did you all notice the defense's vulnerability to Jack Miller's backside RPO? Should we be worried by that scheme, or are they fixing that defensively? Now, did this happen time and time and time again?
Well, this is coming from a clip of practice earlier this week where, depending on the read, you could argue that, and it's a clip of Jack Miller throwing just a quick RPO to, I believe, Garrett Wilson, who scores a touchdown between a backup corner and a backup safety of Ronnie Hickman. I assume a backup corner. But anyway, so it's Vinay is calling it a backside read. It's kind of what it looks like what Penn State did to Ohio State last year. Our guy Ross Fulton is saying maybe it's not a backside read and it's reading that safety initially. And so if that's the case, now you've got a read that is probably inaccurate because he's throwing into double coverage, and yet the coverage still doesn't get there. So I think it's almost a 2-for-1. This is bad, where you've got a quarterback making a bad read and the defense not being able to get there. Now the quarterback makes the throw and the catch is made and he scored. But yeah, it's one clip of practice. It's a really strong throw, but is it the right read? I don't know. But it's an example of what Jack Miller can do, and he's been the third guy in this from the perspective of a lot of people, I think. And does he have an Ohio State arm? I think you saw there, but it's a lot more than just the arm, as Brian Day keeps saying. He wants leadership out of that position as well.
That's like the play in North Dallas 40 where they improvise and the ball goes off the defense and for the touchdown, and the guy playing Tom Landry, not called Tom Landry, but it's obvious that's who it is. So asked Mac Davis, the quarterback, what do you call that play? And he said a touchdown, and it cracked up the entire room. And then he brought him back to reality that, that's fine, but, none of you are smarter than that computer. And, and this, to see some of the stuff that is so intricate about the passing attack that Ohio State has, somebody who was defending Justin Fields and his slow progression reads knock that has come out from, whoever media are trying to, torpedo his chance to go in the top 3 or 4 picks. Just take a look at it was posted on Twitter, just what he's seeing and what the reads are and how intricate this thing is. And, Kevin brought up in our chat here, we can talk about the NCAA versus the Supreme Court thing, which has bubbled up today. There's a court case in the Supreme Court. And you think about the time management of these guys to be able to go to class, get their workouts in, study this playbook that is NFL caliber playbook, and get it down pat to where there's never a blown play. I mean, if there is, it's like one a game at the most. Is nothing short of amazing to me, the dedication that these guys have. And you have to have it, because if not, the sophisticated defense on the other side is going to take you apart. So to me, I'm astounded by some of the things that I'm seeing and hearing about how intricate this offense is. And in regards to his question, do I worry about it from the defensive side of the ball? No, because it's spring football, and they are showing them looks to put them in bad positions so that they learn what it takes to make the proper read, make the proper play, etc. So this is the time where you want to illustrate and where you want to bring that out for the defense and teach. I mean, this is what spring football is all about.
Right. If you sit there and, 2 points I want to make on this, let's say that they're doing 70 plays of 11 on 11 or whatever, and they put one play out there, and, we're so – as a beat, and I think if you take it into a wider stance in terms of just Ohio State interest, we're so starved for information that every single player that is in frame on there is being dissected to every little move that they've made. So, Jerry Emig, if you're listening, please let us into a practice so we have some more stuff to dilute the discussion a little bit. But it's a play. It's one play that they put out there in a social media tweet or whatever, I guarantee you they probably kind of watched the play before they put it out there. I wouldn't get too concerned about one play. It's kind of like back in the early recruiting days when I started at Rivals, and we would get whole game tapes sent in of high school prospects, and it was our job to kind of cut it down into highlights. I'm like, you give me 15 minutes of video, I could turn a 2-star into a 5-star. I mean, just based on what I'm putting out there. So, I think there's a little bit of a forced perspective there too. So I wouldn't be concerned about any one play that I'm seeing in terms of the entirety of what the upcoming 21 season is going to be.
Yeah. One play of one practice of 2 months of practice, because they consider fall camp to be just a continuation of spring camp. So it's just a glimpse and a drop in the bucket, basically. But eventually they need to stop it.
Yeah, certainly. Just we're so void of information coming out of spring practice, and college football fans are so hypersensitive, critical of their team and what they would like to see, and the expectations that any little bit of information, if a quarterback who's battling for the position, it leaks out through a red zone interception, well, he's not the guy. We latch onto that a little bit too heavily. Cheryl alluding to this, and just to piggyback on something that Steve said, just to put a cap on the Justin Fields conversation. And I saw this actual tweet, I think, coming from Tony yesterday. I don't think there was any question that yesterday's pro day confirmed that, Justin Fields, he locks in on those receivers. There's no question about that.
Didn't look at a second receiver all day yesterday.
Didn't happen. Didn't happen at all. I was waiting to see that out of him, and he just didn't show it. But from the physical standpoint side, on a serious note, did that just confirm everything we already knew, or was he even more outstanding than was thought?
I mean, I was impressed with everything that I saw there. I mean, he made the throws I expected him to make, and I guess it comes into what your image and what your thoughts of Justin Fields were going into the day. I mean, we've seen him, all of us on this show right now have seen him play 2 years at Ohio State and have seen him make those throws in game action. So, with that being said, there wasn't a ton of surprise for me that he was making it. He's a good kid. I've had the opportunity to talk to him for a couple of years, even going back to when he was a recruit. So, you like to see these kids that you like do well, but I wouldn't say that I was extremely surprised. I think that there are going to be the people out there that, some people just don't like Ohio State, and by extension of that are not going to like Ohio State athletes. And there is a radio guy out there that played for the U that has been just dumping all over Justin Fields. I'm not going to mention his name because I'm not going to give him the pleasure of that. But I mean, I think that in some ways it just almost seems like just petty garbage when it comes out there. But Twitter's not making these draft picks. The talking head shows aren't making those draft picks. We're not making the draft picks. You only have to wow one team. And just from the gasps and the applause that we kind of heard during the throws that he was making, I think he was impressing people.
All right,
he's the prototype. Nothing he does can surprise me. Like if he took flight, I'd be like, yep, he looks like he could fly. Like if he walked through a wall, I believe that now. I mean, he's the best at Ohio State. He's the best Ohio State has ever had. So he should, look good.
But Ohio State quarterbacks have never been successful in the league. So therefore, due to the transitive property or whatever, Justin Fields is going to is going to flop, right?
Yeah, and I mentioned that on Twitter today with you already have Philadelphia and Miami looking to move on from their Alabama quarterbacks, and nobody brings that up when it comes to Mac Wilson or Mac Jones's, future endeavors as an NFL quarterback. It's funny how that happens.
Mark, we were doing a call yesterday with Justin Fields afterward, and one of the national reporters or somebody from somewhere said, well, what do you speak to the lack of Ohio State quarterbacks who've done very well in the NFL draft? Well, first of all, Justin Fields is not from Ohio. He's from Georgia. He's been at Ohio State for 2 years. And other than Dwayne Haskins, who he maybe kind of halfway knew in passing, he really doesn't know any of the previous quarterbacks who played at Ohio State. Maybe they've stopped back and said hello or whatever, or introduced themselves. But, to ask him a question about the history of the quarterback position at Ohio State would be like asking me, a question about quantum physics. I'm just not going to have much of an answer for you. And didn't even take a physics course in college, so I wouldn't, have much of an opinion on it. So he's left to sit there and defend himself, and basically was saying, well, I don't even really know any of those guys or what the history here has been or anything like that. It was wasted time on a call with Justin Fields about something that is completely irrelevant, because other than Dwayne Haskins, none of them, really worked directly with Ryan Day. So, JT Barrett did for 1 year, but I don't think there's anybody out there who is of a mind belief that he's a franchise NFL quarterback. So, the whole thing is just completely ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the practical application, Steve, is the route you're going is, can we make a connection between the current system, the current coaches, and what's going on, who's being developed, as you guys discussed concerning Michigan and now Ohio State at the quarterback position, versus just what's the legacy, which is fun to talk about, and you can come up with lists and so forth. But, Alabama developing Kenny Stabler, Joe Namath, and Bart Starr in the 50s and 60s isn't really relevant to today. Since then, it's been quite the dry spell at Alabama.
I did like Ryan Day was asked, how well do you think Justin Fields is prepared for the stuff in the NFL that you guys don't do at Ohio State, that you don't prepare him for, that you don't, the stuff that you don't throw in? And he's like, we do everything the NFL does. And that's another thing that's kind of been out there. Like, Dwayne Haskins never learned this or was never shown this, and Justin Fields hasn't been shown this. And Day's like, no, we do everything that the NFL does. And this is a guy who has been in the NFL for years, brought that to Ohio State and brought the Ohio State offense, the passing offense especially, into modern football. And it was just interesting to try to hear somebody like put the assertion out there and then say, well, how's he going to handle that now that you guys clearly haven't prepared him for what he's going to actually see in the NFL. And Day has really taken, I don't know if offense to all of this Justin Fields stuff is, but he's certainly very supportive of Fields and very confident that Fields is going to be just fine in the NFL, and does not like the armchair football scouts talking badly about his quarterback for reasons, as he said, like they hear somebody else watch it. Somebody else watches like 2 minutes of film, and then the other guys parrot those people, and he didn't have any time for them.
And that's what it is, especially in this day and age where everybody's got a media platform in their hand, and it just gets parroted. Exactly right. Dalton Moore, thank you so much for the super chat. And at least the time that I posted your super chat to the screen, it was right on cue in regards to Dalton would like to know on these interceptions, who were the quarterbacks. So when you see the video of the secondary, Cam Martinez in particular makes the interception. Want to see these quarterbacks, who's making that bad throw.
Well, they don't want to sandbag the quarterbacks, and I would agree. I'd say probably all of them, because they're young guys. They don't want to put negative video out there about the quarterbacks throwing an interception and create a perception that somebody is a thrower of interceptions within the fan base. And they try and keep everything in house, as they should, to protect those guys and let them grow and flourish the best way that they can. I think if somebody does throw an interception, my feeling is that Corey Dennis and Kevin Wilson and Ryan Day address it and in film and in study and say, you looked here the wrong way. You went the wrong way with the football, and that's one that we just eat. We throw that one away. We don't throw it into that coverage. So to me, there's nothing to be gained by showing which player is throwing the interception.
It would be funny if they did show like who throws these interceptions throughout the course of camp, but they only like say Jack Miller throws 6 interceptions, but they're all spectacular catches by the defense. So you show those, but those are the only 6 interceptions he's thrown. And CJ Stroud has thrown 11, but they're all boring, so nobody sees them. And yet the fans are only seeing like this. Why does Jack Miller's throwing all of these interceptions? Because we see them on Twitter, and you're keeping count. And I haven't seen CJ Stroud throw 1 interception yet. And it's like, well, it was a 15-yard overthrow that the safety had a fair catch, but whatever. So yeah, you almost do have to protect the quarterbacks and stuff like this. And we saw last year with their social media team where they would take pictures and like you wouldn't be able to see numbers of who was not practicing because of COVID. And they would try to like, you can only see cleats and then like from the knees down, they would show players and you couldn't see any jerseys of who was practicing, and just a whole lot of analysis, the Pruder type, deals going on and trying to figure out what's going on. And that continues then in spring ball with whatever we see on Twitter and Instagram. Well, not for me, Instagram. I can't, it's just too much.
We only put pictures of food on Instagram.
And beer.
Get your face mask. I always face mask, and then I think I'm alluding to a helmet. But get your mask. Get your mask, your Buckeye mask, or whomever you root for. We got about 35 available there at the voiceofcollegefootball.com. Get your free mask, 20% off your first purchase if you so choose. Again, check it out, voiceofcollegefootball.com. All right, I got to say I was a bit blindsided by this story coming out concerning the Supreme Court, and it makes total sense if I'm reading into this right without reading in the article at all, that the business model, which at one point in collegiate athletics was no business model, and then it became some kind of business model, lends itself to a review by the Supreme Court, possibly as to the amateur status of these athletes. It only makes sense. Is this a money-making proposition for these schools? Therefore, we're not looking at amateur athletes competing on Saturdays in particular. Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I got onto C-SPAN about halfway through the arguments in front of the Supreme Court via phone or however they're doing it based on the world we live in today. But it's interesting because, hashtag stick to sports. So I'm not going to get super political, but you have two very defined wings of the Supreme Court, the right-leaning side and the left-leaning side. And it seemed like pretty much everybody, or at least 8 of them, all had already decided that this whole NC2A model of what they want and what they're pushing for, and they're not being this compensation, is garbage, and that we're going to see some seismic changes coming up. I think the question really is going to be, what was argued in front of the circuit court was very narrow in terms of what the compensation should be, somewhere around $59,000, $56,000 or whatever. What does this mean necessarily for name, image, likeness or whatnot? I mean, it's a lot. Let's put it this way. I took journalism law twice at Ohio State. I took it because I just stopped going the first time and obviously failed it. So I had to take it a second time before they would let me leave. It's going to be a very interesting case study, but I'm going to wait and read what some of the legal minds say about it. But, my way too early prediction on this is that it's going to go against the NC2A, and it's going to kind of open up some of the floodgates to change what this amateur model looks like. And honestly, I think it's high time for that.
Yeah, I agree. I listened to some of the arguments as well. I got on the C-SPAN site, and they at least allow you to listen to the audio. I don't think there's any live video of the Supreme Court arguments, which is unfortunate. And it was pretty spirited at times. What was interesting to me was you would start to – it's kind of like the debates where you will get into a topic and about 90 seconds or 2 minutes into it, the time is up. And just as somebody is getting ready to make a really good point, they interrupt them and say, okay, my time is done. The next justice needs to ask you their question. And it's like, just as we're getting to the crux of the matter, getting warmed up here, they would cut it off. So I would like to have, heard a little bit more of some of the different arguments. But again, a complicated issue. And I think at the heart of this, what the NCAA is trying to do is preserve competitiveness so that, let's say, Alabama, Ohio State don't have too big of an advantage in terms of recruiting top prospects away from Wake Forest or whoever else. And of course, that flies in the face that they already have too big of an advantage, and that the sport that they're playing is an entirely different sport than what Ball State and Eastern Michigan are playing, and yet they're all under this one tent. And what sounds like a solution for the Alabamas and the Ohio States of the world to do full cost of attendance or whatever is not something the Patriot League or the MAC or some of these other places can even afford. And it was pointed out 25 schools make money on athletics and run a surplus, whereas the rest of them have to dip into general fund money, and student tuition money has to be used to underwrite athletics, which, again, we come back to how much is too much. Ohio State's spending over $220 million a year on athletics. And are they spending it just because they're raising it? I mean, that's the kind of the bigger question that you come back to. Do they really need $1 million strength coach? Do they really need $6 million football coach? I guess if you want to be the best, you do, but do they need 4 assistant coaches making $1 million? I don't know. Remember a decade and a half ago, they're losing to USC when they had $1 million coordinators, and Jim Haycock and Jim Bowman were making $250,000. So money it makes a difference, I guess. So complex issue, and I don't know how you solve any of these issues to the benefit of everybody, because there's just no all size fits one answer to any of this.
Was it when Urban Meyer was hired, Gene Smith said, we're not going to get into these arms races with the assistant coaches and their salaries? And then, last year, Greg Madison made like 1.5 million or whatever, Kevin Wilson.
Yeah.
So you have to, but to
he
Steve's
made enough
point,
he could afford to retire.
Exactly. With Steve's point, with the arguments of these being timed and the frustration of it, it's no different when I'm watching, Tony Kornheiser's about to make a point, and then boom, ding, his time is up, and then it's time for Michael Wilbon, and it's like, come on. And I think that's probably where they got it from. These, they see how the Supreme Court did it, and it's like, let's do a sports show about that. And then 20 years later, here we are. But this is one of those things where I haven't really followed it, because it's the NCAA, and 2, it's the government. So it's 2 slow-moving entities. And when something's about to happen, I'll figure it out, and I'll pay attention to it then. And maybe that's finally coming. I don't know. It's interesting that they're finally arguing about stuff, but when they start fixing stuff, maybe I'll get more involved. But I think where does the name, image, and likeness also occur in here? Because Ryan Day was asked about that on Monday and said that that's all in a holding pattern, but they're prepared for it. They're getting prepared for it, and they'll do whatever they can. And so there's a lot going on. And for me, like the name, image, and likeness, because that seems like it's more immediate. And so that's kind of, I think, more pertinent than what's going on with the NCAA and the Supreme Court. But again, that's just my biases against both of those 2 entities. But who knows what things are going to look like in 2 years, where CJ Stroud and Jack Miller, maybe Jack Miller, one of those guys, sticks around because they can make $150,000 at Ohio State, and they couldn't do that at, say, Arizona State.
Just get me my video game.
Yes.
Just give me my football video game. I know they've been whatever findings and prior to the 23 season or something like that on my PlayStation 6 or whatever, but I'm a man. I'm 50. I turned 50 this year. I have very few video game playing days left. Just get me my damn game.
The arthritis is going to set in pretty soon.
I'm telling you, man.
Sony and Microsoft would be crazy not to have that that PlayStation 6 or that Xbox 2 or whatever to not be ready by 2023 and make you buy that next console to get that game, because how many people don't have PS5s yet? I don't.
I do.
And so people will have that within the next 2 years, but then Sony's like, aha, But if you want the football game, you're going to need to buy the PS6. It has one more gig.
They'll just microtransaction us to death. They'll find alternative revenue streams in there or whatever. Oh, you want to be able to catch a pass? That's a quarter.
Want to recruit like Bama? That's $150,000. That's Tennessee, sorry.
Unless it's Tennessee, and then it's a McDonald's bag full of money.
You want to be able to recruit?
All right.
Before I say anything else back.
Kevin Noon, Buckeye Grove, Steve Helwagen, Bucknuts, and Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop are here every week, typically Wednesday at 2 o'clock Eastern time. We appreciate you joining in, and you guys, as I say it often, ultimately produce the show. So leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics right here. I think I mentioned it on this show one time that during a couple separate luncheons that I attended where Jim Delaney talked about the struggle between academics and big time college sports, that he laid out very, very well what he experienced as a varsity athlete at a big time program, North Carolina, as a basketball player in the late 60s versus what's experienced right now, and how it's just spiraled out of control in terms of the what's demanded of these athletes and what's given to them as well. It's quite the contrast. And obviously we're not going to go back in time. And I also think a key part of this is the same thing as you view professional sports. Do you view each individual team as its own entity? But no, we view, and the laws treat the NFL as one entity. Major League Baseball is one entity, but there's less of a connection, especially when you start breaking down the levels of a Ball State versus an Ohio State, and how they operate and approach athletics, and especially football. So, as Steve said, complicated matter. It's going to take a long, long time for those two to get together on. But the name, image, likeness, I think we're at a point where that's pretty obvious. Now, the details are the one thing, but in the way this should go and what's fair and just in this country that's supposed to be a free market system, yeah, let's give that up and do the right thing there and get Kevin his game. Can't they put that thing together before 2023 or 4?
It's ridiculous.
They probably have about 2 lines of code done. I mean, we're what, the last game came out like on the PS3 generation. We're on the PS5, so we're way above that. Plus 2, I'm sure they're dragging it, waiting to kind of see what's going to happen with name, image, likeness, and things of that nature. And then you have universities saying, we're not going to sign off our likeness or whatever until X, Y, and Z are met. So, there's going to certainly be a situation of them kind of waiting some things out. But, I think you can at least go to the point of like coding what the stadiums look like and some of that stuff. But, game development, and, I'm really nerding out right here. Game development is not a quick thing. This isn't some basic class that you took in high school or wherever, where your goal was to spit out a game that was like a text adventure game by the end of the semester or whatever. The life cycle of developing a game is 2 to 3 years. So when everybody was saying, take my money now, when it was announced, I was like, slow your roll. It's going to take a minute.
I remember in the 80s, there were computer game magazines with here, free game inside the magazine. And it's just like 6 pages of code that you just type into your computer for the game. It's like, and then you try to load it up and it doesn't work well. Maybe in that 3rd page, there was an O instead of a 0. Good luck with that one, kid.
Justin Fields is in the chat. He wasn't going to get mentioned because I typically just mention number 1 overall picks that show up in the chat. But since he made enough noise, Justin, we will acknowledge you in the chat. We need one of those check mark deals is what YouTube needs to do.
Mark,
I think
I think it's pretty obvious.
Send him the link. Send him the link to access the show, and then we can, bring him on and talk to him. That's what we
with
need
his
to
dog
do.
Uno.
Yeah, his dog Uno, little pug.
There it is. There it is. Anything else from the chat? Don't see anything in here besides Manny Diaz being proclaimed as the best coach in college football. Which again, we
where did he show up on that athletic list?
We need a fact checker around here somewhere. Yeah. Actually,
Justin
I provided
Fields.
that. I gave my ACC coaches rankings earlier this week. Those were released on Monday. Doing the Pac-12 tonight. So, Tabardine, check those out. Don't be surprised if Manny Diaz isn't quite number 1 or 7 or 8 or something like that. All right. Is there anything we've missed? Full spring? Oh, tight ends. Kevin couldn't say enough about the conversation with the tight ends before we started to record here. So I'm sure Kevin's going to take us home with this one.
My signal is going out.
They're going to play with a tight end this year. We do know that. Now, whether they're going to play with 2 tight ends or not remains to be seen, because they had Luke Farrell and Jeremy Ruckert last year. But Farrell, he's off to the NFL, and Ruckert, he could have left, but he decided to come back, and he was fabulous, down the stretch. I think he had maybe a couple touchdown catches against Clemson. So he's a guy that can really damage defenses, but they need to develop some depth at that position, no doubt.
The interesting thing, and again, to your point about if you make it to the NFL, you're great. If you make it to Ohio State, you're great. We talked to 5 Ohio State tight ends today, and 2 of them were walk-ons, to give you an idea of where they are right now. And they've got, I believe, 4 on scholarship, and one's a true freshman, one's a redshirt freshman, one's a redshirt sophomore, and then you've got Jeremy Ruckert. And they did talk about how the plan is for Ruckert to be a larger part of the offense. This is the players saying that, and Jeremy Ruckert was asked about it. He's like, well, we'll see, but that's what he's shooting for. And I think more than any other year prior, this is the year of the tight end at Ohio State. I think Jeremy Ruckert's going to, put up 30 plus catches, 8, 10 touchdowns, and be as much a part of this offense as, dare I say, Ben Hartsock in 2003.
And it's the year of the diamond formation and of the bullet and the Leo and what are all the other what's all the other fool's gold that we've been sold through the years of.
Mike DeAndrea is going to play defensive end. That was from 20 years ago. Mike DeAndrea is going to play defensive end.
He was the number 1 player in the state, right?
Yes. Never panned out, unfortunately. Right. Was always injured.
And he was around the same time as Jason Ott, who was never healthy or whatever, but they were both kind of at the beginning of the star ranking era.
Who's the number 1 tight end in the history of this program? John Frank.
Okay. John Frank.
All right, put an S at the end.
Dudley.
Ricky Dudley was like a top 15 NFL draft pick. I mean, just something absurd.
Fred Puggett led the team in receptions 1 year with 9.
Yeah.
So Jake Stoneburner, 2011 with 14.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Nick
players with 14 that year. That was the clown show year.
Stoneburner had the highest, touchdown to reception ratio. That should put him in the lead.
Nick Van Ed is still banging around the league. He's done pretty well for himself.
It's a 3-year deal.
Yeah, and Ben Hartsock was in the NFL for probably 10 years or more. He was really good. John Lumpkin, I see his name came up. He was okay.
Darnell Sanders left early.
Yeah.
Jake Ballard had some good times in with the Giants, but injuries eventually take their toll.
Frank and Dudley would be the 2 that kind of are at the top of my list right now, without really kind of getting into the grainy black and white film era or anything like that.
Yeah, I think Frank played on 2 Super Bowl teams with the 49ers, and then he retired to go into medicine, I believe. So, just a 5-year NFL career, I think.
Yeah, he kind of hit center stage nationally with a big game against Oklahoma in the non-conference in '83 on national TV. Big game against the Sooners on the road. Justin Fields, I should have listened to Steve, got him a link, got him on here. He would have just done a bang-up job with a promo for the channel right here. Loves the content.
And now there would be no NCAA violation for it.
Yeah,
Right.
he's free and clear.
Yakov 22, just because we have to honor the super chats. Thank you, Yakov 22. You're a loyal supporter here. Do you get more access, you Ohio State guys, than the Michigan beat writers? Do we know? Do we compare notes across the Big Ten?
Didn't they go like forever last year of not talking to anybody, like for months on end, and they were not very happy about that?
Well, and even prior to COVID, I mean, it's called the Fort up there. Whatever their complex is, because they really keep a lot of stuff in house. I would say, under traditional circumstances, they probably get a little less access than Ohio State does. But there certainly were plenty of lean years around here in terms of what the university was offering up, and it just really created a situation where you better get well sourced.
Right at the time that I thought you guys might be off the hook here, the Rod Farva chiming in with a Cameron Babb update. He's asking.
He's one of 10, 11 guys that are trying to get on the field this year, and he's, as far as I know, as far as we've heard, as healthy as he's ever been, strong, and one of the leaders in that room. But there's a bunch of guys in there, and he plays. I think he could play any of the three positions. I'm not sure where he is right now. And when we talk to Brian Hartline later this spring, I'm not sure he's going to tell us where anybody is, because that's just the way things have been going all spring for us. Talk about, yes, we're getting some access, but that access isn't telling us a lot. So I always tell everybody, Cameron Babb, root for Cameron Babb. I mean, he's knee injuries throughout. I think he finished his high school career with a knee injury, and then came to Ohio State and knee injury,
right,
and could have quit, and has seen examples of guys like Johnny Dixon, especially, whose first three years were spent dealing with knee arthritis and things like that. And Johnny Dixon was actually at Pro Day yesterday working out for Ohio State, but a guy who bounced back to have 2 solid years to finish out his career, and that's what Cameron Babb's trying to do. And so far I wouldn't bet against him, but I mean, this is a very talented room. But he's a former top 100 player, just like every other receiver in this room, except for Chris Olave, who's just average.
Yeah, I was just gonna echo that by saying it was a little less crowded of a path for Johnny Dixon to be able to do that than it is going to be for Cameron Babb, just based on the way Ohio State's been recruiting. And then you put on top of that the class that they bring in now with Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka and Jalen Ballard. I mean, it's going to be tough, but we did see a little bit of Babb last year, and great kid. You hope he gets a shot, but you never know. I mean, it's sometimes tough to be able to get opportunity to knock on that door again.
We're also being asked for a running back assessment. Handicap the running back race. Like, that hasn't been done.
Yes, they have running backs. No, we haven't necessarily. I mean, they're not going to rank them at this point or anything else. I mean, Master Teague is going to be your starter probably, at least in terms of where we are today and where we'll be tomorrow and where we will be on August 1st, and maybe when they line up against Minnesota. But there's going to be plenty of opportunity for these other guys to step up. I mean, we're dealing with a Marcus Crowley that now admits that he's 100%. We had the opportunity to talk to them before. I mean, Steel Chambers is a bit of a wild card. Mayan Williams, very different type of running back than any of the other backs they have. And then, of course, everybody in Buckeye Nation is really excited about Trevion Henderson and Evan Pryor. But don't forget, they're true freshmen at this point. And, while running back may be one of the positions that we see true freshmen get on the field the quickest, just based on running toward the light, better hold on to that ball. You put it on the turf and, you go to the back of the line.
Yeah, I'm of a belief it's Teague's job to lose. And I think Mayan Williams is going to, make a push, continue his progression from late last season. And obviously the true freshmen, so much to learn. Trevion Henderson and Evan Pryor, we talked about how intricate this offense is. And, what can a young guy really realistically come in and do and move the needle? And so I guess we'll have to wait and see how that all goes. But plenty of options, and that's a great thing. And if there's one injury, hopefully that doesn't derail the running game, obviously, and they're able to keep right on rolling. I mean, I think for this offense to be successful, you've got to be able to run the football and throw. Obviously, have great balance. I mean, that goes without saying, but I mean it in terms of balance and just the idea that one feeds off the other. So Ohio State's been a tremendous run team, and being able to run the football when they want to run the football and when they need to run the football, those have been the hallmarks of Ohio State recent years. I think that'll continue this year.
Now, Steve's corporate affiliation there, 247 Sports, Kevin's rivals, within all that recruiting analysis, sometimes you'll see that NFL comparison. This player looks like or projects to be this style of player. We got a couple comments in the live chat. Justin Fields to Michael Vick and to Randall Cunningham. I didn't see Justin throw any left-handed yesterday. I don't know how well he throws from that side. But other than that, do we have any comparisons?
I think he's got much quicker delivery than Randall Cunningham. Obviously, the athleticism is similar, but even then, Randall was a longer type of runner as well. But it's hard because, like, when I was growing up and I watched John Elway play, like, I never saw him get sacked, and he was always getting out of trouble. And same with Steve Young. Like, these guys were impossible to bring down when they were young, and yet they were passers first. And I don't think Michael Vick was a passer first, and he's just a next level athlete, crazier than anybody. So I think guys like that, and I don't want to compare anybody to John Elway with his arm, but and again, Fields is more athletic than those guys. I mean, that's why he's the prototype. It's hard to compare him to somebody because he's 6'3", 230 pounds, runs a 4.4, throws it as good as any quarterback prospect that has been around, and is faster than anybody since Robert Griffin III, and like has all of these measurables that you want. So how can you compare him to just one guy?
Plus, the game has changed so much from era to era. It's how do you compare somebody to an era ago or 2 eras ago, or I mean, even 10 years ago? It's very difficult. I guess growing up and through my whole life, I've never looked at somebody and said, oh, he reminds me of this guy or whatever. I get asked that all the time on the recruiting front. Who does this recruit remind you of, college or pro? And I'm like, I really can't compare a 16-year-old kid to a 34-year-old man who's doing this. So, I mean, it's to a lesser extent that still exists in terms of, a collegiate kid who's played 0 snaps in the NFL to, we're not going to compare somebody to Gary Hogeboom or, something like that. I mean, we're generally comparing them to guys that are in the Hall of Fame or borderline Hall of Famers or whatever in a lot of instances. So I've always stayed clear of that.
Unless they want to try out for Survivor. Yes, I almost forgot the name of the show.
Justin Fields reminds me of a young Babe Laufenberg, Kevin.
I was going to go through all of the former Browns quarterbacks but I can't. The list is too long.
Charlie Fry. We'll go with one. All right.
I like Charlie Fry.
Yes, Akron native, right? At least that's
where
he went.
He played at Akron. I'm not sure where he was from.
Yeah. Steve Helwagen, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Check out his work, of course. And Steve has been so gracious to post these on the site. We got Kevin Noon from Rivals Buckeye Grove, and of course Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop. And folks, I say this all the time. I hope you enjoy and understand what we get here every week with these three, and track their work on their respective sites. Guys, appreciate it. Have a great rest of your week. Hopefully we'll be back here doing the same thing next Wednesday.
Show 100.